So I've placed all these pieces inside some carburetor cleaner for a little bit. Okay, the parts have all been cleaned. I let them soak in carburetor cleaner for a few hours and then used various brushes. I also used a pad, Scotch-Brite type pad, to buff them out. So now what I'm going to do is take the carburetor body and clean it out with carburetor cleaner one last time, blow it out, and then I'll start assembling everything. There are several little small holes in here that may not look like passages, but they are. Now we're ready to put our brass fitting in. Here's the new seat that you can get from Bing. So we just want to center that on there, kind of press it in a little bit. And then tap it in. Check to make sure it's flush. All right, that's good. Okay, we can place the needle, and remember that this is a spring-loaded catch inside this hole that clips into a groove, and we want to bring it down into the third groove for my carburetor, which is a 1977 R100/7. Press and turn. Once you get it clicked into the first one, there's our first one. So you twist it and press in if you can get a good enough grip on it. There's two, there's three. So we can put the new diaphragm on. Before I do this, I'm gonna wipe this off a bit, some of this white dust that's all over this. Line that up in the notch. This ring can go on anyway, it's not specific. I'm going to place a dab of anti-seize, copper anti-seize on these. Trying to work my way around across so that it seats evenly. There we go. We'll set that aside for now. Here's our gaskets and O-rings. The largest O-ring is going to go on the main jet. This next largest one will go on this shaft for the throttle. This next one goes on the choke assembly, and then the two smaller ones will go on these two. So we'll start with the choke assembly, or the throttle shaft, I mean. We'll just start it on. Until it snaps into that first slot. Then we're going to put some dielectric grease on here. Just a thin coat of dielectric grease. And we'll slide this almost all the way in. We'll keep it up a little bit so that we can put on our bracket And this is a good time to have your other carburetor to look at to see the orientation of things. So this is going to be catching into this groove right here, the top part. And it's kind of hard to get in if you let it drop in all the way. So we want to slide this in like right around that groove and then push it in with the O-ring. Then we take our 2 screws, put those in, the little dab of anti-seize on there. We won't cinch these down right away. You want to make sure that they're not binding too much on your throttle shaft. There's also going to be the throttle adjustment screw here, the idle adjustment throttle, and it's going to have a spring, and they're going to be very close together, so I try to favor pushing this end away because we're going to have a spring here and the spring on this screw, and they're going to hit each other, but this will lessen it. So if you can push this away as much and still have good free play, that's where I like to put it. Okay, now we take our butterfly, look for your dot here, your peened dot that's right there. That should face outward toward you. The beveled screw holes should face towards you, and then just rotate the shaft down and then slide this in with the dot now facing downward towards the ground or towards you, if that's the case. Slide it in carefully and then rotate it back up. Then we just want to position that so that it closes as uniformly as possible in the hole. It's good to hold it up to some light so you can see just how good of a seal you're getting. It gets wedged in there pretty easily. So right there is a pretty good seal. So I'm going to kind of keep it pressed against there, and I'm going to take some thread locker. I've got new screws. And we'll put a dab of medium strength thread locker on there. To just hold it in place from vibrating loose. Before I really cinch these, I'm going to check that again to make sure. I don't know that it's possible to get it totally airtight in there, but as close as you can. So that looks pretty good still. Okay. Works smoothly. Good seal. Okay. So now we can place these on there. Refer to your other put together carburetor. This piece with the stop goes on like so. Then you want a wave washer and one of your skinny nuts. Careful not to cross thread these because you only have about half the thread since this is a machined shaft here. It's easy to cross thread them, and you're going steel onto brass, so it's extra easy to mess up those threads. Okay, and then just tighten that down. Use your hands to hold it in place so it doesn't press against part of the carburetor or inside. You don't want that butterfly to be jammed in there. Okay, then we can attach our spring. So now we can take our adjustment screw with its spring. Don't forget this little metal cap to ride in there. This is going to come right inside here. We will adjust these later, but for now we want to run this screw in. As you can see, it's coming in through here, and it's going to work its way against this stop, and that's going to open up the butterfly slightly. For now, we want to just do a nice base adjustment. And I like to have both carburetors set nearly as near to identical as I can. So what I do is I run this screw in just until it about touches the plate, and just to help me make sure I'm doing each side the same, I just take my smallest feeler gauge and place it in there. Just until it drags on it. Okay, right there is where it's just starting to drag on it. And then I just do one full turn. There's half. There's another. And that ends up being just about right, just letting a small amount of light in. So that's a good base adjustment to start. We can move on to the choke assembly. Going to just slightly remove these little edges. So we take our O-ring and press it on and slowly roll it down over and into place. Put our dielectric grease on there. Remember our horn here and our dimple on the end of the shaft. The dimple is slightly off center, and we want that off center dimple to be closest to the horn. So place it in here, and then just press it in. Make sure it operates smoothly. Keep it pointed the right way. Refer to your old carburetor. This arm comes on in line with the horn, with the nut facing up. Wave washer and the nut. Hold it with your hand. Tighten it up. Okay, now we're going to place the gasket on. Make sure the surface is nice and clear. Take our screws, put a little anti-seize on there. We can now put the O-ring on the main jet body. Before this jet goes in, before that body goes in, we want to put in this setup here, the diffuser and the needle jet. They go together with the holes, atomizer holes, towards the other part. And this part is going to go down in first. These two pieces mate together like that. So that's how it's going to be in there. So we can drop it in, and you may want to take something and kind of make sure it's set in. You can double check by looking through here. Well, the camera may not pick that up, but it should stick out just a little bit from the bottom. Then you can put your main jet body in after you put some grease on the O-ring. Just till it stops. Snug it just enough, not too much. Then we can put our washer in. Then the main jet. Make sure it's clear. We can put the O-ring on the idle jet. These ones are more of a challenge to get on. Sometimes if you take something and wedge it in there very carefully, gently, then you can work it around. Okay, put a little grease on there. That one goes in here. You want to tighten this one until it bottoms out. Now our idle mixture screw. First we got to put our O-ring on. Now place the spring on there. This one goes in this hole. Now this one we don't want to thread it tight in there. We just want to screw it in until it bottoms out. And we just want to do that lightly. This isn't designed to be in there tight against its seat. So we're arriving at the bottom. There's where it stops, and then we're going to go out a turn and a half. And that's just going to be a base adjustment. We'll adjust that later. Now we can install the float needle. You just drop it in here, and then you attach your float. Now my float arm probably looks different than what you're used to seeing. I had an aftermarket upgrade that was done probably 25 years ago, where I use independent floats rather than the floats that are attached to this. But the concept is the same with this piece. It mounts through here, put your pin through starting on the Bing logo side with the knurled end out here, and run that through, and don't force it in yet because you need to adjust this float arm to just be parallel. You want your top edge here, this edge of the float arm, to be parallel with the carburetor body. And I can do mine holding vertical like this because I don't have weights of the floats pressing into the spring-loaded ball. So you will probably need to hold yours on an angle so that it doesn't, there's not so much weight pushing down, because you don't want the ball, the spring-loaded ball, to be compressed when you make this adjustment. You want it parallel with this surface, the line of the float arms and the line of the carburetor body to be parallel without compressing the ball. So I'm going to set that, and the exact measurement is 10.5 millimeters. And it doesn't have to be exact rocket science here, but pretty close is what you want. Mine's just a little bit off, so I'm going to just slightly bend this tab with a screwdriver, just relieve a little bit so that it can settle down a little more. That looks perfect. So now we can tap that in the rest of the way. It goes in fairly easy. Make sure that it moves freely and doesn't bind on anything. Now we can put our float bowl gasket in. Make sure this is pressed in. Don't just drop it in and then put your bowl on. Make sure it's pressed in there good, because if it kind of slips out, it'll bind up, roll over, and not seal properly. Now I actually place a couple of stainless steel washers in the bottom of my bowl, and again, yours is not going to be this way if you have the original floats. These are aftermarket floats made by Bing. Well, I shouldn't say they're aftermarket, they're made by Bing, but they're an upgrade, and that's debatable if they're an upgrade. Before you put the float bowl on, make sure that your jet in here is clear, so you can take and blow some air in there. Put some carburetor cleaner in there, make sure it's clear. But I had a problem with these floats sticking in the bottom, and they wouldn't raise up because they were hitting the sidewall just at the very bottom in the rounded corners. So I called Bing, and they recommended just to put a spacer in there. So stainless steel washers does it. Then we can put the bowl on. Now we can put the diaphragm in. Again, these are set to line up. There's a recessed indent in the carburetor body as well as on the bottom of the rubber diaphragm. Just make sure your needle sets properly into the needle jet in the bottom. And then make sure your tab is lined up properly. Then place your top on with your cable housings towards the side with your choke assembly and your throttle. And gently place that on and kind of wiggle it back and forth a bit to let that rubber diaphragm seat in there properly. And definitely put some anti-seize on these screws. You don't want to cinch them up just yet. You want to work across from each other, slowly cinching it down so that that rubber will set uniformly. And there it's done.